My name is Marcus Rivera, and on September 14, 2019, I died for 12 minutes after my heart exploded in my chest during what should have been a routine Saturday morning jog. I was 28 years old, living my best life in Miami Beach. Picture-perfect apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. Six-figure salary as a marketing director for a luxury fashion brand. My Instagram had 50,000 followers who watched me live what looked like the American dream. I was young, successful, and proud of who I had become as an openly gay man in a city that celebrated everything I represented. My boyfriend Jake and I were the couple everyone admired. We threw parties that made it into lifestyle magazines. We traveled to exotic locations and posted photos that made our friends jealous. I spoke at Pride events about authenticity and living your truth. Corporate America loved me, the young, successful Latino who broke barriers and inspired others to be fearless about their identity. But that morning, everything I thought I knew about life, death, and eternity shattered in an instant. I remember lacing up my running shoes, stepping out into the humid Miami air, feeling invincible. The sun was just breaking through the palm trees. I had my playlist pumping, my fitness tracker ready to log another perfect run. 3 miles in, I felt this crushing pressure in my chest, like someone had wrapped steel cables around my heart and yanked them tight. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I stumbled, gasped for air, and collapsed right there on the sidewalk. The last thing I remember was a jogger screaming for help and the sound of sirens getting closer and closer until everything went silent. Then I wasn't in my body anymore. I was floating above the chaos, watching paramedics work frantically on what looked like a broken version of myself. I could see Jake arriving, his face twisted in horror. I could hear him screaming my name, but his voice sounded distant, like an echo from another world. I felt no pain, no panic, just this strange, overwhelming awareness that I was witnessing something monumental. Suddenly, I was pulled away from that scene, not by force, but by something I can only describe as pure gravity. Not the kind that holds you to the earth, but the kind that draws your soul towards something infinitely greater. I moved through what felt like layers of light and color, each one more vivid and alive than anything I'd ever seen. These weren't just colors, they were emotions, memories, pure truth given form. As I moved deeper into this realm, I began to experience something that broke me completely. I wasn't just observing my life, I was feeling it from every angle, every conversation, every decision, every moment of pride or selfishness played out in perfect clarity. But here's what destroyed me. I felt what everyone else felt too. I felt Jake's confusion every time I dismissed his questions about God. I felt my mother's heartbreak when I stopped calling her after she gently shared her concerns about my lifestyle. I felt the emptiness in young men who looked up to me, who thought that if they could just be as confident and successful as Marcus Rivera, they'd finally find peace. But I was showing them a path that led nowhere. I saw how my influence rippled outward like stones thrown in still water. Young men messaged me, telling me I gave them courage to come out. Women in business said I inspired them to be bold. But what I was leading them toward wasn't freedom. It was a beautiful lie wrapped in rainbow flags and corporate sponsorships. Then, in that place beyond time and space, I felt him before I saw him. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Every fiber of light around me began to pulse with anticipation. And then Jesus appeared, not walking into the space but revealing himself as if he had always been there, waiting for me to have eyes to see. He wasn't the gentle, long-haired figure from church paintings. He was fire and light and love so intense it should have incinerated me, but instead made me feel more seen and known than I'd ever felt in my entire life. His eyes held the weight of every moment I'd ever lived, every choice I'd ever made, and still they overflowed with compassion. He didn't speak with words, but his communication went straight to my soul, bypassing my mind entirely. And what he showed me nearly destroyed me. He showed me faces, souls, people I recognized from pride events, from business conferences, from social media. People who had celebrated me, followed me, looked up to me. And I saw where they were now, not in a place of fire and brimstone, but somewhere infinitely worse. They were in complete spiritual darkness, separated from the source of all light, all love, all truth. But here's what shattered my heart. They weren't there because they were gay. That wasn't the issue at all. They were there because they had rejected the one who created them, who loved them, who had a specific plan and purpose for their lives. They had chosen their own understanding over his truth. They had chosen temporary affirmation over eternal relationship. Jesus turned his gaze fully on me, and I wanted to disappear. But there was no anger in his eyes, only a sorrow so deep it made me weep uncontrollably. He showed me my life through his perspective. Every speaking engagement where I encouraged people to live their truth without pointing them to the truth. Every time I stayed silent when I could have shared his love. Every moment I chose the applause of men over the approval of heaven. I saw the ripple effect of my choices extending far beyond my own life. Young people who had followed my example, believing that identity was something you create rather than something you discover in him. I had been a bridge leading people away from their creator, and I hadn't even realized it. Then Jesus brought me to what I can only describe as a courtroom of light, not a place of condemnation, but of pure revelation. Here, every moment of my 28 years played out in perfect detail. I saw every opportunity I'd had to choose his way instead of mine, every gentle nudge from his spirit that I'd ignored, every person he'd placed in my path to share his love with me. I watched as my mother's prayers rose like incense, year after year, never giving up hope that her son would find his way home. I saw my childhood pastor's face as he baptized me at age 8, the hope in his eyes that this young boy would grow up to serve God. I saw moments when the Holy Spirit had whispered to my heart, trying to warn me that the path I was on led to destruction. Jesus then showed me a book, not made of paper, but of pure light. My name was written at the top, Marcus Antonio Rivera. But as I watched in horror, the words beneath it began to fade, becoming dimmer and dimmer until they were barely visible. Your choices are erasing the story I wrote for you. His voice filled my entire being. I had plans for you, Marcus. I had purposes that would have brought you joy beyond anything this world could offer. But you've been writing your own story over mine. The weight of that truth was unbearable. God himself had authored a beautiful narrative for my life, and I had spent years scribbling my own version over his perfect plan. Not because I was evil, but because I believed the lie that I knew better than my Creator what would make me happy. Then came the vision that will haunt me until my last breath. Jesus took me to witness the place of eternal torment. Not the cartoon version with pitchforks and little red demons, but something far more horrifying. The complete absence of God's presence. I saw souls who had once walked in churches, who had known his name, who had even tasted his goodness, but who had ultimately chosen themselves over him. One face stopped me cold. His name was David, and I had met him at a conference in Los Angeles just months before my death. He had been a youth pastor who left ministry after embracing what he called a more inclusive gospel. We had laughed together about narrow-minded Christians who couldn't accept that love was love. But here, in this place of separation, David was curled into himself, hands clawing at the darkness, tears streaming down his face as he cried out, "I didn't know. I thought I was being loving. I thought I was being kind." The sound of his anguish will echo in my heart forever. Jesus' spirit communicated to mine. They weren't condemned for their attractions or feelings. They were condemned because they took my truth and twisted it into something it was never meant to be. They led my children away from me, calling it love. I wept for them, for myself, for everyone who had believed that God's love meant he had no standards, no truth, no specific design for human flourishing. But then, in his infinite mercy, Jesus showed me what could still be. He showed me two paths spreading out from that moment. In one vision, I returned to my old life. I recovered from my heart attack and went back to Miami, back to my career, back to being the poster child for LGBTQ+ success. I grew older, more influential, wrote books, gave TED Talks. But in that timeline, I was spiritually hollow. My eyes lost their light. My smile became a mask. And when I died again, this time permanently, I drifted away from God's presence into that same darkness I had witnessed. But then he showed me the other path. This one began with loss. I lost friends, lost income, lost the respect of people who had once celebrated me. Jake left. My career crumbled. Social media turned against me. The LGBTQ+ community that had once embraced me now called me a traitor. But in that vision, I saw something beautiful. People coming to me, not to celebrate my success, but to find the truth I had discovered. Young men and women, lost and searching, finding hope in my story. Not because I had all the answers, but because I had encountered the one who did. I saw myself speaking, not from platforms of pride, but from places of humility. My eyes were bright again, my smile genuine. I was finally living the life I was created for. Jesus looked at me with those eyes that held eternity and said, "This is still possible. But the choice is yours, Marcus. I won't force you to love me. I won't make you choose truth over comfort. But I'm giving you another chance to write the ending of your story." Without hesitation, I fell to my knees in that place beyond time and begged him to send me back. I didn't care what it would cost me. I didn't care who I would lose or what I would have to give up. I wanted that second path. I wanted to be who he had always intended me to be. He placed his hand over my heart, not the physical one that had failed me, but the spiritual one that had been dying for years. Warmth flooded through me, not just healing my body, but awakening parts of my soul that had been dormant since childhood. "Tell them," he said as everything began to fade. "Tell them what you saw. Tell them that my love is real, but so is my truth. Tell them that I have a better story for their lives than anything this world can offer." The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air in a hospital room, machines beeping frantically around me. My chest felt like it had been split open and sewn back together. Jake was there, tears streaming down his face, gripping my hand like he was afraid I might disappear again. The doctors said I had been clinically dead for 12 minutes. They called it a miracle that I was alive, let alone coherent. They said there should have been massive brain damage. They ran every test imaginable, but my heart was stronger than it had been in years. One cardiologist actually used the word supernatural in describing my recovery. But they had no idea that I hadn't just come back from clinical death. I had returned from the edge of eternity itself. The days that followed were the most difficult of my life. Every part of me wanted to run back to that place of perfect peace I had experienced in Jesus' presence. Earth felt heavy, complicated, painful. But I knew I had work to do. When Jake visited me 3 days later, I told him everything, every detail, every vision, every word Jesus had spoken to my heart. I watched his face change as I spoke, saw the confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Marcus," he said when I finished, "you had a traumatic experience. Your brain was deprived of oxygen. Maybe this is just some kind of hallucination." I nodded, understanding his skepticism. How could I expect him to believe something I wouldn't have believed myself just days earlier? But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. And I knew I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I resigned from my position. I deleted my social media accounts. I moved out of our shared apartment. It's been 5 years since I died and came back. I live quietly now in a small town outside of Orlando, not far from where I grew up. My bank account looks nothing like it used to, but I've never been richer. I spend my days writing, speaking, and meeting with people who are on the same journey I was on. Successful on the outside, empty on the inside, searching for something real. There are still nights when I wake up shaking, remembering the sounds of those lost souls crying out in that place of separation. Sometimes I see David's face, twisted in anguish. I remember the weight of knowing that my influence had pointed people away from the only one who could save them. And every time that pain hits me, I get on my knees and pray, not just for strength, but for every person still walking the path I once walked. For everyone who thinks this life is all there is. For everyone believing the lie that truth is whatever makes you feel good. If you're one of them, if you've made it this far into my story, I don't think it's an accident. I believe God wanted you to hear this. Maybe because you've been questioning things lately. Maybe because you've felt that same emptiness I carried for years but couldn't name. Maybe because deep down, you know the life you're living doesn't align with the peace you're desperately seeking. I'm not here to shame you or scare you. I'm here to tell you what I saw with my own eyes. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. And your choices echo in eternity. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. You don't have to be perfect to come to God. He just wants your heart to turn toward Him. That's where it begins. When I stood before Jesus, I didn't have theological answers or perfect doctrine. I just had a broken heart and a desperate need for truth. And He met me there with love that changed everything. He doesn't want to take away your identity. He wants to give you your true identity, the one He designed before the world began, the one that will bring you joy beyond anything this world offers. If you're in the LGBTQ+ community, if you've been hurt by Christians who spoke more condemnation than love, I see you. I know that pain. But being celebrated by people doesn't mean you're aligned with your Creator. I was celebrated for years, called a trailblazer, given awards and recognition. And none of it saved me from the spiritual death I was living. But when Jesus called my name, when He showed me His truth wrapped in unconditional love, I knew I had to choose. And you have to choose too. Truth doesn't change based on culture or feelings or even good intentions, and it's waiting for you with arms wide open. So here's my invitation. If something in your heart is stirring right now, don't ignore it. That's God calling you home. Pray to Him. Talk to Him. Ask Him to reveal Himself to you like He did for me. If you don't know what to say, start with this. Jesus, I don't know where to go from here, but I want to know what's real. Show me your truth. That's enough. He'll meet you there. And if you already know Him but you've been living far from Him, it's time to come home. Don't wait. Don't gamble your eternity on tomorrow. He loves you too much to leave you where you are. And I love you too much to stay silent. If this story moved your heart, leave a comment with your first name and where you're from. I want to pray for you by name. And if you feel led, share this with someone else. You never know who might be standing at the edge of eternity, just like I was. I'm Marcus Rivera. I died, I saw eternity, and I came back to tell you that Jesus is the only way. Choose Him while you still can.